The Farseer Trilogy is a very hot topic in my household. My wife absolutely loves the realm of the Elderlings and the Farseer Trilogy. In fact, Fitz in the Farseer books, not just the first trilogy, but all of the different books with Fitz are my wife's favorite part to the realm of the Elderlings. My opinion, though, on the Farseer trilogy is a little bit less flattering. Now, I haven't read the entire Realm of the Elderlings. I am only on the second book of the Live Ship trilogy, so I'm only speaking to the Farseer trilogy in this video. In fact, I'm going to go over each book and give them a rating out of 5 points. And I think a lot of people are going to be a little upset with how I rate these books. My wife tells me that they're very popular online, and frankly, specifically because of the second book, and actually, no, there's a lot of reasons why I think I rate this series a little low. Let's just go ahead and get into it. We got to start off with The Assassin's Apprentice. This is probably the best book in the series, and I think it makes me sad that the ball kind of gets dropped immediately after this one. I think this one's actually set up really well. I think the pacing is genuinely good. The characters are starting to be developed, and most of them are genuinely enjoyable to read. But unfortunately, because of the books that come after this, I don't rate this book as high as I think of a lot of other people would. So let's just get started with it, right? Fitz not remembering his mom is a little weird. At the end of the day, I think the reason why Robin Hobb writes Fitz that way is because she doesn't want to deal with it. If she just writes that Fitz doesn't remember it and she puts it in enough times that, like, hey, people, stop thinking about it, then I might not have to deal with it. Now, that I think that changes a little bit later on, if I remember correctly. To be frank, I wasn't enjoying the series as much as I wanted to, so there might have been more to it later on that I'm just forgetting. Either way, I thought that was a little weird. It was a little too repetitive and it didn't really add too much to the story. Now, let's talk to one of the biggest highlights of the books. I think Fitz growing up is an adorable story. I think that was actually the smartest thing about this entire series was having Fitz start so young. It's great to see this perspective and this growing personality of a character from their earliest days as a child. We really get behind them and we understand why they are the way they are. And that also gets me into a character that I actually enjoy and love, but he ends up not being the best father. And this is really because he didn't know how and was forced into the role. And he is really, in all intents and purposes, a single father. And that's Burrich. Burrich is fantastic. I love him. And I understand why he hates the wit so much for Fitz. But he's a little too aggressive, and obviously that's on purpose. And Fitz, honestly, is not the easiest child to raise, especially in the situation that they're in. And so, even though I love Birch, and I think that he's actually really well done in this book, I feel bad for Fitz that he has to deal with that. And once again, I feel bad for Birch too, but that's not an actual complaint about the book. That's actually one of the best parts of the book. Fitz growing up, Birch raising him, and Fitz growing up with all these other kids around him, even though he eventually has to move on from those kids around him, like Molly, and get into being a bastard. And this book's a really good setup, and it actually moves really good, and the pacing is fantastic. And we get all of the characters laid out. We get Verities, we get Regal, we get the King, we get Chade. It's a lot of good introductions, and I just hate the fact that I have to rate this book less than I would because of what comes. Because it's a fantastic opening book to a series, and it's just not capitalized properly. And I do want to mention how much I love Molly and Fitz's relationship in this. Molly's story overall in this entire trilogy is fantastic. Now, let's get into what rating I give it. And I'm going to actually knock this down a bit because it's a great opening, it's a great and fantastic story, and I wanted to give this a 4 out of 5, but I'm actually going to knock it down to a 3.5 because of how disappointing, specifically the book that comes next is. I can't in good conscience recommend that people pick this up right now. I would not pick this book up if it wasn't for the fact that my wife wanted me to read it so badly. If I knew how much I was going to get real frustrated with this series. So let's get into the worst book out of the three, Royal Assassin. I have so many issues with this book. It drove me absolutely insane. And that started from the beginning of the book. Why is Fitz so sick at the beginning of the book. I know he got poisoned at the end of the first book. I understand actually where this starts. But the reason why I'm asking why is because it's a fundamental part to the opening of this book. In fact, we are sitting there and we are told that this crippling illness is going to affect him for the rest of his life, that he may never be a sturdy person again. We get this entire breakdown of an illness, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to have to learn his assassin skills, and he's going to have to be able to be in the backside and not be so aggressive and not be in the front. He's not going to be able to do extremely strenuous activities. And it sets you up for that. It's like you might be having these seizures the rest of your life. And then it just goes away. It just goes away. She just stops doing that. It just ends. I don't understand why she put it into the book. And someone might sit here and be like, well, you got to get farther in the book. She wasn't planning to build any books after this for Fitz. The third book was supposed to be the final book, and this illness doesn't matter for the trilogy at all. So you can't sit there and be like, well, she put it in for later on. And I don't know if she does. I'm just guessing that maybe that's going to be the case. But it obviously isn't in the trilogy that was supposed to be the only trilogy revolving around Fitz. So why is it in there? And you know what? That's not even my worst complaint about this book. But either way, I'm going to calm down a bit for a second and let's get into some of the things that are actually good about this book and the things that I love and that makes me so upset that there's so much baggage in this book that takes me out of the good stuff. Everything with the red ships was fantastic. Fitz becoming a warrior, going to have to fight them, having to be an assassin, so he's going around and he's poisoning them. Everything to do with it was really, really interesting. And I wish that the book went with that and moved on to that. The red ships were a big deal, and we really, really needed to defeat them. And that's why Verity's is putting all of his energy and time into defeating those ships. And Fitz is out there being his right-hand man and making sure it's getting done, and also working with Shade for the king to help get things done. And it was really good and interesting. And then we get the whole story with Molly and Fitz really blossoming into what it is. And let's be frank, their relationship is a little toxic, but it was so good and adorable. I absolutely loved it because it was real and it was passionate and it was him fighting with who he is and trying to make a life that he wanted and then dealing with being Verity's right hand and assassin. That was really good. That was fantastic. The fact that he had not a love interest, but that he had somebody that was, I assumed, was going to end up being a fundamental part to like him and Molly's story, and that he had to either decide with being with Molly, and he had to decide of whether or not he was going to be with Molly or do his duty. It was very interesting. It was very compelling. It was great. But that just all leads me into the thing that absolutely made me want to rip my hair out when reading this book, and that is Verity's. Or sorry, Verity. My wife gets really mad that I keep saying Verity's. Like, yes, whatever. I don't say his name exactly correct. Calm down, honey. But either way, Verity is one of the worst characters ever. I cannot stand this man. In fact, I have a whole video ranting about how terrible of a character this guy is. So I'm not going to waste time really getting into that. I'm just going to say that Verity's is extremely incompetent and I just hate what he brings to the story. And just to simplify things, why doesn't he put a guard at his dad's door? Why does he let his brother be the one in control of everything? Why isn't there a doctor sent by Verity for the king? It doesn't make any sense and it drives me insane. But then he leaves, and I have to say, I think once again that this just was a throwaway. I honestly don't believe Robin Hobb knew exactly where things were going when she was writing this book. I assume that she's one of those people, which is a lot of writers, they just write and things go where they go. And that was just unfortunate for me. Verity's leaving was fine, and I know he had to go off, and he had to go search for this Deus Ex Machina, and though Deus Ex Machinas were really popular, they're always around. I found it a sloppy way of getting him to go away. It was just, oh, hey, go away so that I can make all this bad stuff happen so I can get to the end of the book. I didn't like it. It didn't feel real flushed out, and it just frustrated me a little bit. Now, that actually led to another good thing about the book. Fitz and Kettricken. I really enjoy their relationship. There are a few points in their relationship that I get a little frustrated with, but I enjoyed that she actually listened to Fitz to an extent. I will say though that I'm still frustrated. Why didn't she put the guard at the king's door like Fitz recommended? Once again, this is just a level of incompetence, and it didn't need to be written into the story that Fitz told her that, because it's never brought up again. In fact, Fitz never has to complain about it. But Kettricken's arc, other than that little tidbit, is very good. It's actually fantastic, and it's another one of the strong points of the book series. I really enjoy it, but once again, it's just bogged down, and this leads to the end of the book. I hate the end of this book. I wanted to love it, and I thought I knew where it was going to go, but her final decision to have Fitz fake his death, I think it was absolutely terrible, and it kind of went against where she was setting everything up to be, and once again did a whole thing where, why bring this into it if you're not going to use it? All right, now we have the other duchies coming to Fitz. Now, he built up a really good relationships with them throughout this book, and they basically come to him and tell him that they're going to overthrow Regal, or at least some of them are going to break off from the six duchies because Regal's a terrible king. And they tell Fitz, we would love you to be the man put in place to kind of rule things, to basically watch over things until the prince is born and can grow up and become the actual new king. Because everybody thinks that Verity is dead. And I liked that. I really enjoyed that. And it was very interesting. And Fitz agrees to go along with it. And it was a dumb choice by him. I mean, like, I know Chade rips into him for it later on, justifiably. It was probably not the smartest thing. But those people said they were going to do it with or without Fitz. Fitz wasn't an actual factor in it. He could be. It was either be a factor in it or we're going to do it without you. Yet then she has Fitz fakes his own death. And what happens? They don't rebel against Regal. Nothing happens. It's as if that entire complaint didn't matter or mean anything at all. It's just a wasted setup. It doesn't pay off at all. It drives me insane. I was pissed. I didn't even want to read the next book, but I love my wife, and so I moved on to the next one. But either way, I'm going to rate The Royal Assassin a 2 out of 5. I don't like this book. I just don't. I think it's a bad book. I think it's very sloppy writing. I think that Robin Hobb just kind of pieces story arcs together, but doesn't really go through with any of it. I really hope that it's just a low point in the series as a whole. We'll see what happens. I'm enjoying the Life Ship trilogy actually a lot, so I'm really excited to keep reading that. But as a whole, this book is one of the worst books I've read in a very long time. But let's get into the third book, The Assassin's Quest. Now, this book's an okay book. To be 100% honest, I don't have overarching complaints about it. I'm going to get into things, but overall, I think my entire take from this book is I was so frustrated at the end of the second book that I had a hard time really getting into this book. My wife, I think this is one of her favorite books, but for me, it just is okay. If it had a better setup, I think it could have been better. Let's just start with the beginning. The wolf. I just didn't care. I didn't care if Fitz acted like a wolf. We got to get him to be a man again. Okay, fine, whatever. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was just there, and I was just getting through it. And then we get into a fairly decent part of the book. I enjoyed him and the wolf going off, and that he made a decision he's going to assassinate Regal, and they're going to go for it. And we get a lot of good stuff set up at that part. In fact, we get to a point where we have people to help Fitz train in the wit. And then that just completely gets wasted. It's another point that just doesn't matter at all. It's thrown in there and we really get no payoff for it, at least in this book series. And I'm not even sure why it's put there. I'll I take it back. It does have payoff at the end of this book, but I'm not really going to get into that too much. So there is I'll retract a little bit of my statement. There is some importance to this. I think it could have had more, but it's fine. And then we get to the part where the wolf leaves him, and I'm just like, okay, you just needed another excuse to get a certain character out of the way. Felt a lot like the whole Verity thing about we need Verity to leave, so I'm just going to send him off, and then that way he's out of the picture. And it felt the same way with the wolf. I didn't care why. It seemed kind of dumb, especially because the wolf just comes back. I know there's more to it than that, but that's really all it comes down to is that the wolf leaves. She needed an excuse for it to leave. And then, well, I need it to be in the story though later on. I just needed Fitz to have this alone time. So I'm going to throw this just little bit in there and get the wolf out for like a while. I don't think she needed to. I think the wolf could have stayed through that. I think it would have been just as good and fine if the wolf was just there the whole time. And then we get to the best part of the book, and that is Fitz and Starling. They have great chemistry. I feel bad that Molly's gone, but I completely understand why. In fact, I think Molly's arc in this entire book series is probably like the only amazing thing in the entire book series. I love where Molly's arc ends, and I love how Fitz handles it. But I don't want to get into that. We'll leave that alone. Let's just get into how Fitz and Starling is actually very good. She betrays him, he forgives her, very realistic. And then we also get the old woman trainer who goes with them, another great character who I have a lot of fun with them. And I think the story could have been really good with those three. But I just kind of, once they get to the road, I just don't care as much. I kind of started getting tired of Fitz's problem with the road and the skill. I just felt like it was another level of incompetence of the people around him. Like, oh, come on, guys. You all know that you can't trust Fitz, but they're all just letting him go off and do his own thing. And I know that they stop him at times, but then he still just gets away from them. It felt just a little bit lacking, especially since the old lady should have really understood better. But instead of training him, and yes, I know she says, I don't want to interfere because I might affect things poorly or I might ruin things. Yeah, but you're already doing something. You're already there and you're already helping him to get past it. And you think that you would go the extra mile as somebody that knows all about the skill that you would do it. And it's not that this part was bad. Once again, the road was fine. If you just had the first and third book, these were books that I would just read. Really, it's the second one that like takes me out of it. They're decent enough. They're good enough to read and enjoyable enough. And then we get to all of the stuff with Verity again and the dragon. And I have to say, I just don't like the stuff with the dragons. I don't like where that went. I just feel the dragon stuff was kind of stupid and just an overarching thing to keep Verity out of the picture because Verity would have been powerful enough to do everything himself. So we couldn't have him there. And we just need something that will then also beat the day because we're not dealing with the red ships, which is the big bad of the entire book series at all for most of the third book. And so we just need, once again, that Deus Ex Machina that will show up at the end and win the day. And then it'll explain everything, except for what happened to the white ship. I mean, why did Fitz see a white ship no one else saw? Why don't we ever get anything about that? It just felt poorly ended. The dragons were just there because they needed to be. Now, I'll say the Regal as a villain was fine. I mean, he's pretty generic. The stuff with the other wit users was good. They were good villains. They made it seem scary and tough, except for the fact that Verity could just do whatever he wants, except for he had to put everything into the dragon, except for Fitz. Gotta say Fitz. I don't know. It just felt mediocre at best. So I'm just going to give the Assassin's Quest a 3 out of 5. This book series is a 3 out of 5. It could have been a 4, but it just falls flat. I just don't think that there was much structure to it. I think a little bit more storyboarding, a little bit more cleaning up. It just needed to be edited more. They needed another read through. Just cut the chaff and just get to the core story. And I think they could have done a much better job with this trilogy. My wife loves it, and I just don't.